Welcome again and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Gianluca. I've seen there's several EVPA members in the audience, and I'll take just a second to introduce you to EVPA for those of you who are not really aware of what we do and who we are. So first of all, we are a network. We connect 300 members across Europe. We are a community because we all embrace the same values and we are committed to foster investing for impact in Europe. We are a market builder because we were founded more than 18 years ago when impact was not really a buzzword yet, by a group of venture capitalists that were interested to apply the principles of venture capital to the philanthropic sphere. And soon they were joined by a group of foundations that were really interested in becoming a bit more strategic and to experiment along the spectrum of capital. And then we are a knowledge and a policy hub because we conduct practitioners-oriented research, we facilitate peer learning, we collect data, and we educate and train practitioners, and we also try to bridge the policymakers with our community of practitioners. In a nutshell, we envision a world where philanthropy and investment combine to drive societal impact. We are part of a global movement, of a global family under the coordination of the International Venture Philanthropy Center. We have sister organizations throughout the world, and we really want to enhance the concept of investing for impact globally. Without really going in depth, I'd just like to position where our expertise lies in the spectrum of capital. So on the, let's say, sides of the spectrum, we find traditional grant making and sustainable and responsible investing. And in between, we have identified a couple of strategies that were also mentioned by Luis before. One is investing for impact that goes from engaged grant making, so the strategic use and deployment of grants, until the impact investment that embeds some elements of additionality, and I'll elaborate a second on that. And we also recognized another strategy that is, we call it investing with impact, that has often less flexibility when it comes to let's say the financial additionality component and the risks and financial returns they can accept. Our own area of focus, as was mentioned before and suggested by our tagline, is this really investing for impact segment. So without further ado, I'd like to dive into our proposed impact fund segmentation that comes from all the conversations we have had with our members as well as with the European hubs in the harmonization work that I will explain in a second. Before that, I'd like to stress why we believe this discussion is very urgent and timely nowadays as EVPA, but many of the reasons were already mentioned by Luis in his introduction before, so I won't go in depth into them. But we really see also at European level a world where impact and SDGs really became mainstream. There has been a proliferation of self-claimed impact funds, and a lot of stakeholders that goes from policymakers to potential funders and institutional investors still don't have a clear, don't understand the distinctions between ESG, sustainable finance, and impact investment. And the problem is that the confusion that arises is then reflected into existing regulations, such as the SFDR, which, as we know, can dilute the transformational power of the entire impact movement because it puts several impact funds into the same pot and group, let's say. And that's why we believe this is really the moment to develop an harmonized methodology that captures all the different nuances of impact investment. And that's one of the reasons why we started this conversation in 2020 with a group of European hubs. And I'll go very quickly through the key milestones we have achieved, but just to showcase what we have done and what we have achieved so far. So 2020 was really the year in which this group, this data harmonization group, was kicked off by the Italian, French, German, and Spanish hub, who invited EVPA and GSG to join the conversation. And it was a year where some market sizing studies were launched. And when we first started a collaboration as EVPA with the Spain hub and ESADE to jointly collect data on impact investment in Spain. 2021 was the year in which we had a session at the User Summit organized by the European Commission, and there was a clear call for harmonization on data collection and market sizing. And that's why that's where we gained a bit more energy and stamina, and we invited other NABs to join, the Impact Investing Institute and the Dutch NAB. We agreed on a first European impact investment questionnaire to use in an harmonized way, and we prepared and set the basis for the first joint data collection in 2022. So this is the year in which we really launched ourselves in this coordination of this work with different European NABs. So we had, as EVPA, one-on-one partnership agreement with all the NABs, and we really try to collect data and size the European impact investment market in an harmonized way to produce numbers that are also comparable across countries. And this will lead to the first joint report on European impact investment, which we aim to launch at our EVPA annual conference on the 1st of December this year. I won't go in depth into how this work will move forward in the future. We want to structure a bit more the activity of the consortium, facilitate the replication, and maybe create a European database, joint database of impact investors. But this is just to say that in the methodology we are presenting today has been the results of all these discussions that embedded a lot of important and relevant stakeholders when it comes to impact investment in Europe. So presenting the harmonized methodology will be very straightforward for me because it includes all the elements that has already been touched upon both by Guillermo and Marta. So I won't go in depth into them. We have the segmentation pillars that for us are 3 criteria and the ABC framework. So intentionality, measurability, and additionality, as well as focusing on organizations that contribute to solutions. We made important distinctions between direct and indirect impact investment because the direct one is capital deployed by funds directly to social enterprises or investees, while the indirect is the impact investment that is channeled through third-party vehicles. And we wanted to recognize this distinction really to avoid the risk of double counting impact investment twice, considered by a funder of a fund that consider impact investment their investment into a fund, as well as the impact investment deployed by the fund itself. And finally, we recognize that there's a huge variety of organizations that can really, let's say, seek different strategies with different vehicles. And it's important that we distinguish among the strategies of the different vehicles. And that's why we focused on a new unit. I'll be very briefly to just refresh you what already Guillermo mentioned, so I won't go in depth, but the focus is on organizations that contribute to solutions. As you know, investors can engage in different ways. First is by signaling that impact matters. They can engage actively, providing proactive efforts to improve businesses' effects on people and planet. They can grow new or undersupplied capital markets, and they can provide flexible capital. And as Guillermo showed before, these elements can combine into, let's say, 6 different strategies identified by the impact management project that goes from the more passive C1 that just signal that impact matters to the more engaged C6 where all these elements are combined into a strategy. Why? We also dived into a conversation with our members because we recently launched an initiative around catalytic capital, and we wanted to dive into the concept of additionality and learn whether let's say the additionality identified by the impact management project are also reflected into our community of members and European impact funds. And what we found out is that we distinguish between financial and non-financial additionality. As Guillermo said, the main elements of financial additionality are still the flexible capital provision that can go not just on concessionary capital, but it can also cover patient and really tailored financial support. And again, this concept of new or underserved markets that are willing to accept disproportionate risks that can emerge from different elements. So for right now, until here, we have a strong alignment with what has been recognized by the Impact Management Project. When it comes to the non-financial additionality, which again refers to that non-financial support that leads to an impact that would have not happened otherwise, we realize that often the strategies adopted by investors of taking a seat on the board or giving access to network on to their investees did not always really lead to an impact that would have not happened otherwise. So we thought it was important to dive into this engage actively component and understand what type of non-financial support provided can really lead to this non-financial additionality. And the first one that has been mentioned by all our members is this really high focus on impact measurement and management. This is very important in order to structure the way in which the investee really thinks about impact measurement and management and improve their impact in the long term. And often our members are the only one or among us, a small group of investors that really believe in not just in the power of impact measurement and management, but they're also willing to bear the costs of delivering this kind of support that takes time and resources. So we believe this is a very important element that should be recognized that leads to non-financial additionality. Another one that has been again mentioned is a tailored non-financial support, because we know non-financial support can be provided in different ways, but tailoring it to the need of the investees takes that extra costs in terms of time and resources that not all investors are willing to take. And finally, there has been some cases of members mentioning access to networks of partners and potential follow-on funders, especially in time of crisis. So these are times in which the investees have difficulties in getting enough revenues or really are in difficulties. And in that moment, the access to the right partners and to the right co-investors, let's say, can really makes the difference into the survival of an enterprise. So that's a bit how we looked at these two types of additionality. And when it comes to reflecting this into the segmentation of the market, we again look at the contribute to solutions, let's say, segment of the market, and we identify the impact investment segment as those that includes this element of intentionality and measurability. But then we let's say identify a sub-segment that is the additional impact investment, which embeds these elements of flexible capital, new underserved markets, and this non-financial additionality. And as you can see from the figure I'm showing, we recognize the C1 classes as being part of the impact investment sphere, the C3 to C6 has been part of the additional impact investment, while when it comes to the C2 that embeds this element of engage actively, sort of extra assessment we need is important to be done to really distinguish between those non-financial services that leads to additionality and those that don't. And yeah, I'll conclude with a couple of cases just to give a bit more of a practical touch to what I've just shown and presented. So the first one is the case of Shaping Impact Group, a fund manager who most of you probably know, based in Belgium. They've launched a first fund that is called SI2 fund. As part of their investment criteria, there is this strong social impact and focus on innovation that proves that they really aim at supporting investees that contribute to solutions. They provide a wide extent of non-financial support that goes from active support and guidance, but also includes and is a consequence of their impact intelligence, their strong knowledge about impact measurement and management, and their willingness to engage with their investees about it. So they have this strong, high non-financial additionality component. And when it comes to financial additionality, they offer investment conditions that fit both financial and impact objectives. And from a conversation also with them and other members, we have seen that their financial additionality can vary across time. They've recently launched another fund that is called SI3 fund. I won't go in depth into it, but just to you'll see in a moment what I would like to show that I think is relevant to highlight here. But in terms of investment criteria, it's a bit different, but again, focus on contributing to solutions. When it comes to the non-financial additionality is the same. And again, when it comes to the financial additionality, it can vary over time. And what do I mean for that? So what we started developing with our committee of members is this investor additionality map that we can believe can really bring clarity in the ecosystem, not just to impact funds, but to other institutions that are maybe interested in funding impact funds or supporting them as policymakers. So on one axis, we put this financial additionality component, and on the other axis, we look at the non-financial additionality. And what I believe is very interesting to highlight here is how we see SI2 fund being placed at the beginning, when they obviously, when it comes to the non-financial additionality, that was very high. When it comes to the financial additionality, first, it can vary across portfolio. So this is a sort of like overall balanced position of where they see their portfolio of investments. But as we know, some investment can be more risky and other can be less. And what I think was interesting for them was to start very high on the financial additionality, taking some bets to their portfolio, and then depending on those bets and how they go throughout the life cycle of the fund, their financial additionality component evolved, and they had to really refine a bit their strategy at the fund level, and their financial additionality along time was lower. When it comes to SI3 fund, the newly launched fund, now they position it very high on this financial additionality because they're at the stage in which they can start taking the bets when they see an impact potential, and then depending on those bets, we'll see how this fund will evolve. I'm about to conclude, so the second case, very quickly, I'd like to present is of another Belgian fund manager, but active in a very different context, and this is the case of Campani. They focus on smallholder farmers in the south, so and they go only where other investors are not going. So these smallholder farmers that cannot access capital otherwise, and that's why we believe they contribute to solutions. When it comes to non-financial additionality, they take both a role in the governance, but they have this training, technical assistance embedded into their model that is delivered by their NGO shareholders network and other partners that deliver this technical assistance on the fields, and that also supports them finding new deals on the field. And on top of that, they also have and offer technical assistance through grants. And we believe they have this high non-financial additionality. And when it comes to their financial additionality, they have a long investment horizon of up to 10 years. They do small investment amounts, so they try really to tackle the value of death and the organizations that cannot attract funding otherwise. And they also have, thanks to the grant that they've received from the government, the possibility to deploy some grants as first loss capital to attract and mobilize other resources that are more risk averse, let's say. And we believe that leads to a very high financial additionality as well. And that's why their strategy is not really moving. It's a bit more static, and we kind of place them on the top right. Before concluding, I'd like to stress that this is really to be tested with our members. We started this conversation. We believe it can provide clarity in the ecosystem, but it's not, again, to incentivize organizations to place themselves at the top right. We want to really trigger an informed conversations about these two important types of additionality, and also give visibility to a lot of funds that may have strong non-financial additionality, a low financial additionality, and that can expose them to potential source of funding, for example, that the additionality in general could not expose them because they may perceive it as something very, very risky by default. And yeah, I'd like to conclude before I open up with some questions a bit with providing 3 key elements of how we see the way forward to be. So first of all, we want to dive into the different nuances of impact investment together with our partners, with the NABs, and really to provide a clear picture in Europe. We see we need, as Marta mentioned, an honest conversation about listed assets and whether we can, and under which criteria, we can consider them as assets that contribute to solutions. We want to dive into this indirect impact investment, so understanding better who are the funders of the impact funds we know that are deploying impact investment, and consider and better understand this segment. And as EVPA also, we believe we are best placed to dive into this concept of additionality that, as you know, defines a bit our community. On top of that, we see important synergies with the sustainability/ESG world, and we believe we should collaborate a bit more to provide, again, more clarity on the distinctions between sustainable and impact investment. And last but not least, we believe that although there are a lot of differences across European countries, and we have observed it with our work, but also with other world regions, we believe that global harmonization is needed, and exercises like the one we have done with the European NABs should be replicated all throughout the world, and we want to play a role in facilitating that replication to happen. So I'll stop there. Here you can see my contact information in case you would like to send me some follow-up questions via email. But now I'd like to ask whether any of you has any questions. I'd be more than happy to provide more details about my presentation.
Thanks so much, Gianluca, for your presentation. And yes, now we have the time for Q&A, so that you can share your thoughts or maybe ask some questions to Gianluca about what he just presented, the EVPA segmentation, new segmentation regarding investor additionality.
Hi, Gianluca. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was extremely useful. I'm Maria. I'm ESG and impact investing consultant. My question is, I work with a lot of international clients, and I see you focus on investor additionality, when what I see in France particularly is that based on this confusion that comes from SFDR, there might be players that are more focused on company additionality. How do you see that? Is the way forward based on focusing on investor additionality, which is probably far more challenging to prove? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, for the question, I think definitely the answer is yes. We need to understand how impact investment operates at different levels. So it's not really about the additionality of the organizations in the field that contribute to the solutions, but it's really about the role that impact investors can play in maximizing that impact. And we see these as an important layer of clarifications, let's say, and we are really committed to dive into the supply side of the market and segment that part and that side of the market, informing all the stakeholders about the different strategies that can be adopted by investors and the effects and outcomes that they have on the impact that is achieved by the organization on the field.
Thank you, Gianluca. Any other comments?
Yeah, hi Gianluca, thank you so much for the presentation. I work for a private equity firm, And my question is, how does this new framework fit or with the difference between investing with impact and for impact? So how would an investor with impact fit into this new like framework in terms of its additionality? Yeah, thanks.
That's a very simple question, and I'm very glad you asked that. For us, investing for impact and additional impact investment is the same. So we really see in the graphs I've shown before, additional impact investment is investing for impact, and what stands outside that can be considered as impact investment, but without this element of additionality, is what we have always considered and we will consider as investing with impact. I've presented it today like this because it's really the result of all the conversations with the European NABs, and we didn't want to stick to our own terminology, but at the end of the day, we ended up discussing the same elements of the strategies. So there is really a match between what I presented today and our original EVPA terminology, let's say. And sorry, I'll conclude just by saying that for us, it's not really about the term. We don't want to stick to our own terminology if that is not what is reflected in the market and what is perceived as the best terminology. We just want to provide clarity in the market using the terminology that better fits all the shareholders and stakeholders.
Thank you. I think this is good to know. Okay, I think we're all fine. Anyway, we keep in touch, Gianluca, and we will follow your work for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you very much for everyone for the attention, and have a nice discussion today.